Has spooky season come early? I don't know. It's July, but today we're going to read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I'm excited to be back. I know it's been a hot minute since I've filmed a vlog, but they're one of my favorite content-y things to film. I just like chatting with you guys while I read and then telling you guys what I thought. You know, back to basics. I have a headache. Oh, God. Yeah. There's not a whole lot I have to say about that. I've been in a wicked reading slump. I know I mentioned that in my mid-year book freakout tag, which I will tag down below. But historically, the best thing to get me out of a reading slump is a good thriller or horror book. So, had my eye on this for just over a year now. Just about a year now, something like that. And it's finally time to crack into her. Let's do it. Okay, slight change of plans. I just read the first chapter of the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix, which is one of the books that I really have had my eye on for quite some time now. And I was reading it for a try a chapter tag because I'm trying to break out of my reading slump. But honest to God, now I just really want to read this. It was the third chapter I had read. But I low-key want this to have its own vlog. So we're going to do that instead. Here's the thing about the first chapter of this book. I think it is so painfully relatable in a lot of ways. Even as a 23-year-old who is not a housewife, works a full-time job, I'm not even in a relationship. I have very little in common with this main character. And I also just really like the protagonist, Patricia, so far. I think she's funny and witty and intelligent in a way that isn't being appreciated. And I cannot wait to read more of this. I'm going to dive back in and keep going. I am 50 pages into the book. Oh my God. The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. And really enjoying it so far. It's going swimmingly, but I'm going to take a break and go eat a snack. Because I have to go to the gym in about an hour, and I'm starving. Hello! It's been 0.2 seconds for you. It's tomorrow morning. I just got back from yoga and ate breakfast, and I'm gonna pop back into the book. I'm about halfway through. I'm on page 199. It's 410 pages long or something. Yeah. I'm enjoying it so far. When I was adding it to my Goodreads last night, I read a 1-star non-spoiler review because I was curious as to why this person thought it was 1 star. And, I disagree with a lot of what they said. I'm going to try and formulate my thoughts a little bit more on that front for when I, sit down at the end and do my, chatty review go-over part. But for now, we're just going to tuck on in. Yesterday, I finished the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. And we're going to talk about it. So first of all, I apologize in advance. I'm a little bit out of practice in filming a book review, so this might be a little bit more disjointed than it could be, but we're getting back into it. I'm going to start with a synopsis, start at the very beginning. We're going to go through some content warnings, and then I'm going to talk about my feelings. Before we do that, I'm going to tell you I gave this book 4 stars out of 5 on Goodreads. Alright, so in this book we are following our protagonist. Her name is Patricia, although we are really following a group of 5-6 women in the South. But our main protagonist, Patricia, it's set in the 90s mostly, but she is a housewife in the South. She has 2 kids. We watch Patricia and these women over the course of a lot of years, quite a handful of years. So when we open, her kids are relatively small, and by the time the book ends, they are firmly teenagers. So, you know, she's dealing with the family problems. Her husband is away a lot. He's a psychiatrist. He works in a hospital. And she's kind of bored with the drudgery of her life. And so she decides, I think at her husband's suggestion, if I recall, to join a book club. So she joins this, the like very formal book club run by, I don't even remember her name, Marjorie, I think, where they read like real literature from prescribed lists that Marjorie lays out for them every year. And at the opening of the book, we follow Patricia, who is supposed to be leading book club, and she has not read the book. She walks in, it causes a whole commotion. After that book club, she's approached by this woman named Kitty, who says that she and, if I recall correctly, Mary Ellen are starting their own book club. Hands her a book. It's a trashy true crime novel. Patricia doesn't think it's her thing. She thinks she's a little above that, sits down, devours it in a couple of days, and thus the book club is born. Alright, so we have the book club, and then after these women have formed their book club, a man named James Harris moves into town to take care of his very old, dying great aunt, Anne Savage, I believe her name is, and she ends up kind of, their lives end up very intertwined. She convinces the book club to look into him because she is fairly certain he has been committing crimes. One thing I'm going to say is that it's obvious from basically the very beginning, so this isn't really a spoiler. James Harris is a vampire type thing. He's essentially a vampire. This is not a mystery in any way. We're not trying to figure out who's doing the crimes. We're not, that is not what this book is about. This book is about a group of women whom nobody takes seriously, trying to stop a man or monster, however you want to look at it, who is harming their community. I have a small list of content warnings to go over with you. As always, I'm so sorry if I've missed anything. I'm not perfect. I really should keep a running list while I'm reading when I'm doing content warnings, but I usually don't, so I just try to remember everything. Okay, I'm going to say sexual assault and rape. There's not necessarily a very graphic rape scene, but there's a scene that it's kind of alluding to rape, although that's not necessarily what's happening, and then another character is raped and we experience the aftermath of that. So if that is something you avoid, I don't recommend picking up this book. We also have racism, lynching, ? I'm not entirely sure if it counts as a lynching, but it felt far too close for comfort in my opinion, so if that is something you avoid, I don't recommend it. We also have mentioned domestic violence. Once again, we don't necessarily see anyone being hit, but we do get to see the aftermath of someone being abused. We have mentioned suicide, mentioned drug use, murder, gore, graphic depictions of violence. And then we also have, if it's something that really doesn't sit right with you, there's a lot of sexism, misogyny, specifically gaslighting of women by their husbands and the men in their community, and also by other women. So if that is something that does not sit right with you, maybe pass on this book. But otherwise, I did really like it, and I think it's worth the read. Yes, so like I was saying, this book is in no way a mystery. This is not a mystery story. We go into it knowing there's a vampire in town. Right off the bat, you know who the vampire is. It's more about the, journey and the destination than the, trying to solve the case. It's more about trying to figure out how to stop him than it is trying to figure out what's happening. And we as the reader, even especially, we know even before Patricia does. And I think it was written in a very fun way where, like, it's one of those stories where he essentially tells you how it ends right at the beginning. The prologue was honestly maybe my favorite part of the book. I just want to read you, like, the very first, not the author's note, the very first, like, the very first line is, "This story ends in blood." And then he goes on in the prologue, to say basically that, like, this is a very bloody story, so much that they're going to swim in it, they're going to drown in it, they're going to be covered and drenched in blood, which by the end is true. So you go into it, like, knowing, and the title is literally The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. There is no surprise that this book is going in the direction of a group of women fucking murking vampire. Like, we've been new. That's not a surprise. I think it's very well written. I really, really like Hendrix's writing style. I would be interested to read more. I read the author's note because I like to read those. And I think I might check out My Best Friend's Exorcism, which I think was his first book. One thing I want to say, I know I mentioned this, I think, in one of my vlog clips, is that I read a 1-star review when I was adding it to my, like, currently reading thing on Goodreads because I was curious, because I was halfway through at that point and I was curious as to how, like, what would make it a 1-star review. And the reviewer, who was a white man, I think that's important when I tell you, was basically fucking demolishing Grady for his depiction of women, the way he wrote women, the way he wrote people of color, basically saying it was a sexist, anti-feminist, anti-black mess, which I disagree with. And, you know, he was like, how dare people be here talking about how well written these women were? Hardcore disagree. I thought all of the women were written really well. That is not to say they are all likable. I didn't like Grace very much at all. But I liked Grace because I appreciated her place in the story, in the setting, and I think she was a really important character. And all of these women had, I think, very unique viewpoints and personalities and motivations. I don't think, on the whole, any of them super felt like a woman written by a man, even though they were women written by a man. Women written by a man. Who? Words. That being said, as always happens, especially in, like, thrillers and horror when there are women written by men, I notice this a lot. Every once in a while there will be, like, a paragraph or a phrase. It's often, like, descriptions of women where I'm like, that's where you lost me, because women don't usually think about each other and talk about each other that way. Like, there was one part where she's, like, helping one of her friends and she was talking about, like, the slope of her breast and how she looked like a plucked chicken, and I was like, I was like, that ain't it. But other than, like, those little things, I really appreciated how they were written. Which is not to say that they are all likable characters. I disliked every single man in the book, which I think was intentional. They were all assholes who were gaslighting the shit out of their wives, wanting them to, you know, sit down, shut up, keep the house clean, take care of the kids. That very, like, you know, in a lot of ways, this book didn't feel like it was set in the 90s. And I mean that in, like, more of the way that, like, they spoke to each other than in the way of, like, the content, because, like, obviously some of the content, like, belied the fact that it was a little bit more modern. But as far as how they spoke and interacted with each other, it felt a little bit older, a little bit more dated, and that was probably intentional. But yeah. I think at the end of the day, this book did a lot of good with female friendships and women choosing to take back their, like, agency over their lives. I think all of these women felt incredibly powerless in the first half of the book, and in the last, you know, 50, 60 pages, we get to watch them grab that power, use it, soak themselves in blood. Big yikes. Hi, it's like an hour and a half later. I'm so sorry if you can hear the rain. It started raining. I've been trying to think about what else I want to say about this book. I really liked it. I liked the first half and the last 50 pages a lot. And then the like third quarter of the book, basically, I was like not really. I was having like, you know that TikTok audio that's like, are we sure the direction we're going? That's how I felt the entire like 250 to like 350 page, 200 to like 350, that like section of the book. I was like, huh? The men are impossible. They're awful. The women are kind of incredible. I loved them all. I thought the end was really satisfying, but not easy. And I really appreciated that. It wasn't just like all the girls being like, we're gonna stake a vampire, and then they just like do, and it's all over. Like the promise of the premise, you have to deliver on the promise of your premise, right? That is something they tell you in all of the like screenwriting books, and by all of them, I mean I'm fairly certain that is specifically Save the Cat, which is my favorite. But you have to deliver on the promise of the premise, and the promise of the premise, they say, I already read it, but you know, it's this book will end in blood. This story ends in blood. That is the promise of the premise. By the time the story is over, they will be covered in blood. Some of it will be theirs, some of it will belong to others, but they will drip with it, they will swim in it, they will drown in it. And I really think, at the end of the day, I think it delivers what it's promising. I think it has some commentary on classism, on racism, on sexism, misogyny, the existence of a housewife, family matters, that like white people thing where it's like appearance first always. You know, the whole like lying to save face, hiding to save face, that I think happens in most cultures, but I think is so like blatantly apparent in especially like rich white people circles. Like they will do anything to hide the unsavory bits from everyone. And I think this book deals with all of that pretty well. 4 out of 5 stars. Its job was to break me out of my reading slump. That was the sole purpose of reading this book. I think we did it. I'm going to go downstairs after this and I'm going to start another book. So, it's too soon to tell yet, but I'm feeling cautiously optimistic. Thank you for hanging out with me. Come down below, comment, subscribe. Let's chat about what you thought about the book in the comments if you've read it. Thank you for hanging out with me, and I will see you very, very soon.